Sir Francis Galton, who is known as the father of eugenics, once said, "The aim of eugenics is to represent each class or sect by its best specimens, that done, to leave them to work out their own common civilization in their own way." Eugenics is a very controversial topic. According to our textbook, it is the control of individual reproductive choices to achieve a societal goal. As this class is genetics and society, eugenics fits right at the center of what we learn about. The idea of control in the definition of eugenics refers to gene choices and how we can influence what genes are passed on to the next generations and what genes get artificially selected out of the population. The other part of the definition is achieving a societal goal. Eugenics can be good or bad, depending on that societal goal and how it is reached. There are many examples of eugenics throughout history. Those who use the power of genetics for good and those who use it for evil. Because eugenics is specifically targeting humans and how we reproduce, there are many moral and ethical dilemmas surrounding this topic. To better understand this issue, let's dive deeper into the many possible interpretations of eugenics. What is eugenics? Eugenics can be many things. We are aware of major examples of eugenics, such as Nazis killing millions of people in order to have a perfect Aryan race. There are other examples of eugenics that are less aggressive and tragic, as well as some that are positive, if you try not to get too political about it. For the moment being, let's call genocide in the name of eugenics the bad or negative version of it, and the good or positive version is responsible parents going to a genetic counselor to see if they have anything that could potentially be passed on to their children. When Sir Francis Galton coined the term eugenics in 1883, he defined it as the science of improvement of the human race germplasm through better breeding. Germplasm is the genetic material of germ cells, and the word eugenics means well-born. Galton's eugenics were the positive type, trying to get people to be healthy and to have smarter people in the population, so when they reproduce, the whole human race would be improved because of their superior brains. Now, the word superior is where it gets political, and when people begin to have problems. Who gets to decide what superior is? Who chooses what traits are selected to stay and which ones are selected to go? Nazi extremism might seem far out from happening again, but if it's one small step at a time, who knows? So, Sir Francis Galton named eugenics in 1883, and there has been a lot that has happened since then. Worldwide genocides are something that makes the news and the history books, and rightfully so, but there are some other historical occurrences that did not make the headlines. The U.S. had its problems with genetics, to say the least. In 1896, Connecticut was the first state to forbid people to have sex with a person who was considered feeble-minded, or a person who had epilepsy. In 1907, the United States as a whole enacted a eugenic law requiring the sterilization of institutionalized disabled males and males that were criminals, and they had to be recommended by a medical professional for sterilization. There were offices and jobs specifically created to collect data on eugenics. Immigration was affected as well because the U.S. stopped, and I quote, "idiots, imbeciles, feeble-minded, epileptics, and insane persons from entering the country." That addition to the Immigration Act cut immigration significantly from specific areas. This law was taken to the Supreme Court and, insanely enough, upheld in an 8-to-1 vote. The Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was quoted saying, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles is enough." This famous case was one of 17-year-old Carrie Buck. She was from Charlottesville, and her hometown was trying to put her on trial because her mother was in an insane asylum and her father had raped her mother, and that's how Carrie was born. The young girl was sterilized because the society back then decided that they did not want to have, and I quote, socially inadequate offspring. Carrie Buck was a B student in school, however, so it's not really known if she was feeble-minded or not. They treated her feeble-mindedness as if it was an inherited trait that could be charted through her family, and they used a pedigree during the trial to show how it was passed down from her parents to Carrie. All this information was found in our book, and it is estimated that 70,000 Americans were sterilized during this time. Because of protests and people willing to fight for their cause, programs like this ended in the 70s. In the 1980s, a new form of eugenics emerged. In the article Protecting the Unborn as Modern-Day Eugenics, author Stephanie Yu Lim warns of how eugenics plays a role in our current society that we might not even be aware of. In the 80s, news and media outlets turned people to panic over a crack epidemic, and specifically homed in on how pregnant women can hurt the next generation with their addictions. The media made these women out to be monsters who were intentionally trying to hurt their children, rather than women who had addictions and needed medical treatment. The prosecution of these women ensued. They were considered bad mothers, unfit to take care of their children. The author talks about how the prosecutors created a class of women who were socially undesirable. Lim wrote, "Society would be better off if someone else raised these children." And that was when she was talking about the mindset of the public after they began to develop stories about these drug addict mothers. States worked to prevent these women from reproducing because they didn't want those socially undesirable traits to be passed on to the next generation. This trait was addiction. The prosecutors, knowingly or unknowingly, became eugenicists because they got women into treatment programs, suggested abortions, and other birth control methods. Women who got pregnant but knew something might be wrong didn't want to go to the doctor because they were afraid of being prosecuted. So that led poor women to not get medical treatment during their pregnancy or after the birth of their child because they were afraid. That led to more deaths and disease in infants and mothers. This relates to our class because society changed the reproductive goals for the society's benefits, supposedly. Here are some examples of eugenics that have already happened. We, as a society, have to decide what we should continue doing and what we should not have done and won't do again. Obviously, the Nazis murdering millions to achieve a perfect race, very wrong. But what about selecting genes for reproduction? Visiting the genetic counselor? Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy had an article published in 2014 over eugenics, and it said, if prenatal testing identifies an undesired gene, prospective parents may choose to continue the pregnancy, to abort the fetus, often with the plan to later attempt a new pregnancy. Studies suggest that in the United States, 90% of positive diagnoses from prenatal testing result in abortion. The parents who cannot have a child of their own sometimes look for other options. Where they might look is the sperm bank. The repository for germinal choice was a sperm bank that was created to house what they called superior sperm. They originally wanted sperm from Olympic athletes and Nobel Prize winners, but the majority of prize winners decided to pass on that opportunity. Their donors were still very prestigious men. Geniuses and Olympic-level athletes donated, and the sperm was deemed better than a regular sperm bank. Now, it is understandable that these parents, looking for sperm donors, were trying to find the best for their child with what they wanted for ideal traits. But when does it go too far? There are many ethical dilemmas when it comes to choosing genes for a child selectively. There are clear instances of good and bad, like the Nazis and the proactive parents, but the lines between the two can get blurred real fast. Eugenics is something that not a lot of people are aware of, at least not how they are affected. Some are aware of the instances that have happened, like genocides and sterilization laws, but many are unaware of how society has influenced their genes and their reproductive choices. Human reproduction is influenced by society, culture, and religion. All of these things have to do with morals rather than ethics. So if we are talking about eugenics on a societal level, like sterilization of thousands of people, it is clearly an ethical issue. If it's something that you're personally thinking about, it may seem to be more of a moral issue. I believe it is unethical to choose other people's reproductive choices. There are many factors that weigh in and understand before making any decisions about eugenics, but hopefully this video has helped you learn more about a genetic technology that impacts you and me. Thanks.